I, 35 male, have been married to my wife, 33 female, for 7 years now. Or should I say, was married, since I don't know where we stand anymore. We met in college, dated for 3 years, got engaged, and then tied the knot. The first 6 years of our marriage were what I would call picture perfect. We both had stable careers, me in finance and her in marketing. We bought a modest house in the suburbs, went on vacations twice a year, and were generally living the American dream. We didn't have kids yet, but we were planning to start trying this year. For context, I've always been the higher earner in our household, making about 60% of our combined income. This was never an issue between us, at least not openly. My wife seemed content with our financial arrangement, and we pooled our money together in joint accounts, though we each kept small separate accounts for personal spending. We never fought about money, and we were both reasonably good with our finances. We had an emergency fund that could cover 6 months of expenses and retirement accounts, and we were steadily paying down our mortgage. Things started to change about a year ago. The financial firm I worked for underwent a major restructuring after being acquired by a larger corporation. Several departments were consolidated, and many employees were either laid off or had their roles significantly altered. I was one of the fortunate ones who kept their job, but my position changed dramatically. I went from being a team leader to basically starting over in a new division where I had less experience. This came with a substantial pay cut, about 30% less than what I was making before. It was either accept this new role or be let go entirely. And with the job market being uncertain, I chose to stay. When I broke this news to my wife, she was initially supportive, or at least she appeared to be. She said all the right things. "We'll get through this together. It's just temporary. You'll work your way back up." And for the first couple of months, things seemed okay. We tightened our budget, cut back on luxuries, and dipped into our emergency fund to maintain our standard of living while I adjusted to my new role and looked for better opportunities. But as the months went by and my job search yielded no better offers, I could feel a shift in my wife's attitude. Her supportive comments became tinged with frustration and impatience. "Have you applied for that job I sent you? Did you network with so-and-so like I suggested? Maybe you should consider changing industries altogether." These weren't offered as helpful suggestions, but delivered with an underlying tone of disappointment. 6 months into my new role, we had our first major fight about money. We had to cancel a vacation we'd been planning for months because it no longer fit our budget. My wife was upset, which I understood, but then she said something that caught me off guard. She mentioned that her friend's husband had also faced a career setback but had bounced back within 3 months because he hustled harder and didn't accept defeat. The implication was clear. I wasn't trying hard enough. From that point on, our relationship began to deteriorate. My wife became increasingly critical of my career choices and financial decisions. If I bought lunch at work instead of bringing food from home, I'd get a notification from our banking app with a passive-aggressive message from her. If I mentioned being tired after work, she'd suggest that maybe I wasn't putting in enough effort to improve our situation. The worst part was when I was working harder than ever, I was putting in 50 to 60-hour weeks, trying to prove my worth in my new role, taking online courses to enhance my skills, applying for jobs almost daily, and networking whenever possible. But nothing seemed to be enough for her. The financial strain was real. We had to dip deeper into our emergency fund, cut back on more expenses, and even consider downsizing our home. But instead of feeling like we were in this together, I increasingly felt like I was on my own. About 9 months into this difficult period, I started noticing other changes in my wife's behavior. She began going out more with her friends, often not returning until late. She became protective of her phone, changing her password and angling the screen away from me when texting. She started putting more effort into her appearance before leaving the house, something she hadn't done much during our marriage except for special occasions. When I asked about these changes, she dismissed my concerns, saying she was just trying to maintain her sanity during our difficult time. As our 7th wedding anniversary approached, I wanted to do something special despite our financial constraints. I had been secretly working on a side project, a small business idea I'd had for years but never pursued. It was a financial consulting service for small businesses, leveraging my expertise in a more independent way. I had secured my first 2 clients and was hoping to grow it into something that could eventually replace my corporate job. I decided that I would surprise her with this news on our anniversary, hoping it would show her that I was actively working toward improving our situation. I made reservations at a moderately priced restaurant. Not our usual anniversary spot, but still nice. Bought a small gift I could afford and even picked up flowers on the way home. I was genuinely excited to share my news with her and hoped this would be the beginning of rebuilding our relationship. When I arrived home that evening, my wife was dressed beautifully, and for a moment it felt like old times. She had a gift bag for me, which I thought was a good sign. We exchanged pleasantries, and I suggested we open our gifts before heading to dinner. I gave her the flowers, a small jewelry box containing a pair of earrings. Not expensive, but something I knew she had admired months ago. She opened it, thanked me, but I could tell she was underwhelmed. Then she handed me her gift bag. Inside wasn't an anniversary gift. It was divorce papers. I sat there stunned, the papers in my hand, unable to process what was happening. She began explaining her decision, saying that the past year had shown her that we wanted different things in life. She said she needed financial security and a partner who could provide stability. She actually used the phrase, "It's unmanly to struggle financially," and that she couldn't see herself growing old with someone who accepted mediocrity. I was devastated, angry, and humiliated all at once. The woman who had vowed to stand by me for richer or for poorer was leaving because we had experienced one difficult year after 6 good ones. She hadn't even given me a full year to get back on my feet. Through my shock, I remembered my surprise announcement. I told her about my side business, the clients I had secured, and my plans to grow it. I explained that while it wasn't making much money yet, it had potential, and I was excited about building something of my own instead of being at the mercy of corporate restructuring again. Her reaction was not what I expected. Instead of being impressed or sharing my excitement, she seemed annoyed that I had kept this from her. Then, in what felt like emotional whiplash, she changed her tone completely. She said perhaps she had been too hasty with the divorce papers. Maybe we could work things out now that I had this promising new venture. She suggested we put the divorce on hold and see how my business developed over the next few months. That's when I realized what was happening. She wasn't interested in staying married to me. She was interested in staying married to my potential income. When she thought I was going to remain in my reduced position indefinitely, she wanted out. But the moment she saw a possibility of financial recovery, she wanted to try again. In that moment, something broke inside me. Oh, the love I had felt for her was overshadowed by this painful revelation about her character. I looked at her and said something I never thought I would say to anyone, let alone my wife. I told her that it was unwomanly of her to abandon her husband during his only period of hardship in 7 years of marriage. I said that while she was judging my manhood based on my income, She was failing at the most basic expectation of a spouse, to support your partner through difficult times. I then told her that I would be signing the divorce papers, not because she wanted me to, but because I no longer wanted to be married to someone who saw me as a bank account rather than a partner. I said I would be staying with a friend for a few days while she figured out what she wanted to do about our living situation. I left the house with just an overnight bag, the divorce papers, and a sense of both heartbreak and strange relief. I checked into a hotel instead of bothering any friends and spent the night alternating between bouts of anger, sadness, and numbness. It's been 2 days now, and my phone has been blowing up with messages and calls from her, ranging from apologetic to angry to pleading. She's told our friends and family different versions of what happened, mostly painting herself as the victim who was blindsided by my decision to leave. Some have reached out to me confused about what's really going on. I don't know what to do next. Part of me wants to try to save our marriage because despite everything, 7 years is a long time to just throw away. Another part of me feels like I've seen her true colors and there's no going back from that. I'm also worried about how a divorce will impact my fledgling business and already precarious financial situation. Am I overreacting to what might have been her speaking out of frustration? Is it wrong of me to throw away our marriage over one horrible thing she said and did? Should I at least try couples counseling before signing those papers? Or should I accept that our relationship was apparently conditional all along and move on with my life? Update 1. First, I want to thank everyone who commented on my original post. I was overwhelmed by the response and support. Reading through your perspectives helped me gain some clarity during this chaotic time. After spending 2 nights in a hotel, I realized I couldn't afford to keep that up given my financial situation. A college buddy who lives about 30 minutes away offered me his spare room for a few weeks until I figure things out. So I moved there yesterday. I've been working remotely for my day job and continuing to develop my side business in the evenings. My wife has been on a campaign to win me back that has been intense, to say the least. She showed up at my hotel. She tracked my location through our shared account that I forgot to disable. The morning after our confrontation, crying and saying she made a terrible mistake. When I moved to my friend's place, she somehow got his address, probably from a mutual friend, and showed up there too with a handwritten letter and more tears. The letter was several pages long, explaining that she had been under stress at her own job, something she never mentioned before, and that seeing me struggle triggered her childhood insecurities about financial stability. She claimed she never meant to go through with the divorce and that the papers were just meant to shock me into action, essentially confirming that it was manipulation just with a sympathetic backstory attached. I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop to talk things through calmly. During our conversation, she admitted that she had been talking to her friends, particularly one whose husband makes significantly more money than I ever did, and they had been putting ideas in her head about what she deserved in a marriage. She said she had been comparing our life to theirs and feeling like she was missing out. She also confessed that her increased focus on her appearance and nights out were partly to make me jealous and partly because her friends encouraged her to keep her options open. When I asked her directly if she had been unfaithful, she swore she hadn't crossed any physical boundaries, but admitted to some harmless flirting to boost her self-esteem. I don't know if I believe her completely, but I also don't know if it even matters at this point. I told her I needed more time to think and that I would be staying at a friend's place for at least a couple more weeks. I explained that while I appreciated her honesty, it didn't erase what happened or magically fix my trust in her. She seemed to accept this, though reluctantly. After our meeting, I consulted with a divorce attorney to understand my options since we live in an equitable distribution state and have no children. the process wouldn't be as complicated as some divorces. We would need to divide our assets and debts fairly, though not necessarily equally. The attorney advised me to gather all financial documentation and to be careful about the timing of my business growth in relation to divorce proceedings. If my business shows significant profit after the divorce is finalized, it would be solely mine. But if it takes off during proceedings, it could be considered marital property to be divided. On the business front, I've secured a third client and have 2 more promising leads. It's still not enough to replace my full-time income, but it's growing faster than I expected. This has been a silver lining in an otherwise dark time. Throwing myself into work that I actually enjoy has been therapeutic. I've also started seeing a therapist individually to help process everything. My first session was yesterday, and while 1 hour barely scratched the surface, it felt good to talk to a professional who could offer perspective without judgment. Several friends and family members have reached out after hearing conflicting stories. I've been honest but brief, not wanting to trash my wife, but also not willing to let her narrative be the only one they hear. Most have been supportive once they understand what really happened, though her closest friends have predictably taken her side. I'm still torn about what to do. When I think about the good years we had, I wonder if we could rebuild with proper counseling and clear boundaries. But when I remember the look on her face as she handed me those divorce papers and the calculated way she tried to walk it back when she learned about my business potential, I feel like there's a fundamental breach that can't be repaired. My plan for now is to continue staying with my friend, focus on my business and day job, continue therapy, and give myself some time before making any permanent decisions. The attorney advised that I don't need to file the papers immediately if I'm uncertain, but also warned against reconciling without addressing the underlying issues through formal means like a post-nuptial agreement. I'll update again when I've made more decisions or if anything significant changes. Update 2. Things have escalated quickly over the past few days and not in a good way. The day after my last update, I went to our house while my wife was at work to pick up more of my clothes and some documents I needed for both my regular job and my side business. I used my key to enter, planning to be in and out quickly. What I found inside was disturbing. Our home office, which we've always shared, had been completely taken over by my wife. My desk had been moved to the corner, and many of my business files and documents were not where I had left them. After searching for a while, I found some of them stuffed into a box in the closet, but others were missing entirely. Most concerning were the missing client contracts and some business plan documents that contained detailed financial projections. While looking for these missing documents, I discovered something else. In her desk drawer was a notebook where she had apparently been documenting our financial situation in detail. There were notes about my salary reduction, calculations of our monthly expenses, and a list of titled options that included items like divorce, separate finances, and disturbingly, accident insurance with a question mark. There was also a printed email exchange between her and a divorce attorney, different from the one who had prepared the papers she gave me, dated 3 months ago, well before our anniversary. This suggested that she had been planning the divorce for much longer than she admitted and had consulted with at least 2 different attorneys. The accident insurance note was particularly chilling, though it could have been innocent, perhaps considering whether to purchase additional insurance given our financial situation. I took photos of these pages with my phone, gathered what documents I could find, and left before she returned. I didn't take the notebook because I didn't want to alert her that I had seen it. I called my attorney immediately and explained what I had discovered. He advised me to secure any important documents and to change my passwords for all financial accounts immediately. He also recommended I check my credit report for any recent opened accounts or inquiries I wasn't aware of. Following his advice, I discovered that my wife had opened a separate credit card in her name 3 months ago and had been making significant purchases. Since it wasn't a joint account, it hadn't shown up in our shared finances. I also found that she had been systematically moving small amounts of money from our joint savings to her personal account. Not enough to notice at once, but it added up to almost $12,000 over the past 6 months. With this new information, my attorney advised me to file the divorce papers immediately rather than waiting. He explained that in our state, the date of filing can be important for determining the cutoff for marital assets and debts, and given her apparent financial maneuvering, it would be in my best interest to establish that date as soon as possible. So yesterday, I officially filed for divorce. My attorney included a request for a temporary restraining order on marital assets to prevent any further movement of funds or disposal of property until the divorce is settled. When my wife was served with the papers at her workplace, the attorney advised this was the most secure way to ensure proper service, she completely lost it. She called me screaming, asking how I could humiliate her like that in front of her colleagues. Then she showed up at my friend's house unannounced again, this time clearly intoxicated, causing a scene that ended with my friend threatening to call the police if she didn't leave. Later that night, I started receiving messages from her family members accusing me of being cruel and unnecessarily aggressive with the divorce filing and service. Apparently, she told them I was trying to steal her share of our assets by sneakily filing first, and that the financial documentation I found was just her organizing our finances to help us through this difficult time. This morning I woke up to dozens of social media notifications. My wife had made several public posts about our situation, portraying herself as the victim of a husband who abandoned her after she made one mistake out of frustration. She referenced my new business suggesting I had been secretly planning my exit from the marriage by developing it without her knowledge, and implied that the real reason I was divorcing her was so I wouldn't have to share the potential profits. Several of her friends and family members have commented supportive messages, many containing thinly veiled or direct insults towards me. A few mutual friends reached out privately asking my side of the story, but most seemed to have accepted her narrative without question. My attorney advised me not to respond to any of these posts or messages and to document everything for potential use in the divorce proceedings if her behavior crosses into defamation or harassment. He also suggested I consider a more formal temporary restraining order if her unannounced visits continue. On a more positive note, my side business continues to grow. I've secured those 2 additional clients I mentioned as leads in my last update, bringing the total to 5. It's still not replacing my full-time income, but it's getting closer, and the client feedback has been extremely positive. I'm starting to see a path forward professionally, even if my personal life is in shambles. I'm trying to focus on the future and not get dragged into the drama my wife is creating, but it's difficult when it feels like my reputation is being publicly shredded. My attorney assures me that the courts won't care about social media drama and will focus on the financial facts, which clearly support my position. At this point, I've accepted that reconciliation is off the table. The trust is completely broken, and her reaction to the divorce filing has shown me a side of her I never knew existed despite our 7 years together. It's like living in a bad movie plot, and I just want it to be over so I can move on with my life. I'll update again when there are significant developments in the divorce proceedings or if anything else major occurs. Update 3. The situation has taken unexpected turns in the last few days, some shocking and others potentially positive. First, the most dramatic development. The day after my last update, I received an urgent call from my attorney. He had been contacted by my wife's new lawyer, her third one now, who revealed that my wife was withdrawing all contestations to the divorce and was agreeing to my proposed asset division. This was surprising since we hadn't even submitted a formal proposal yet. We were still in the preliminary stages of financial discovery. My attorney was suspicious of this sudden capitulation and advised me not to agree to anything until we understood what was happening. He scheduled an emergency meeting with her attorney for the following morning, which I attended. At this meeting, her lawyer explained that my wife had a change of heart about fighting the divorce and wanted to proceed as amicably and quickly as possible. When pressed for details, the lawyer seemed uncomfortable, but eventually revealed that my wife had been advised by her therapist to take this approach for her mental health. This explanation seemed odd, but we proceeded cautiously. My attorney presented our initial asset division proposal, which was fair, but certainly not slanted in my wife's favor, given her prior financial maneuvering. Her lawyer accepted it with minimal negotiation, another red flag. As we were leaving the meeting, her lawyer pulled me aside, with my attorney present, and said something cryptic. "You might want to check your business email." He refused to elaborate further. When I got back to my friend's place, I checked my business email and found a message from a name I didn't recognize. The subject line was, "Important information about your wife." The email contained screenshots of a private Facebook group conversation between my wife and several of her friends, including the one she had mentioned who had been putting ideas in her head. In these conversations, which dated back nearly a year, they discussed in explicit detail their plans to upgrade from their current husbands to more financially successful men. My wife had shared intimate details of our marriage, mocked my career setback, and even discussed specific strategies for maximizing what she could get in a divorce. The most recent messages from just after I filed for divorce revealed that she had been seeing someone else, her friend's brother, who happened to be a successful real estate developer, for at least 4 months. I immediately forwarded this email to my attorney and called him. He confirmed that this kind of evidence could be useful in divorce proceedings in our state, potentially impacting asset division due to dissipation of marital assets if she spent money on this relationship, and potentially affecting alimony considerations if adultery could be proven. After discussing it further, we realized this explained her sudden willingness to agree to our terms. Someone had clearly leaked these conversations to her as well, possibly the same person who sent them to me, and she was trying to finalize the divorce quickly before this information could be formally introduced in court. My attorney advised that we could use this as leverage to negotiate an even more favorable settlement, but after consideration, I decided to stick with our original fair proposal. I didn't want to drag this out any longer or sink to a vindictive level despite her actions. I just wanted it over with so I could move on with my life with my dignity intact. We proceeded with the uncontested divorce filing, with an expedited hearing date set for next week, due to both parties being in agreement on all terms. In our state, an uncontested divorce can be finalized much more quickly than a contested one. On the personal front, this revelation was both painful and oddly liberating. The confirmation of her affair hurt, of course, but it also removed any lingering doubts about my decision to end the marriage. The emotional manipulation, financial deception, and now confirmed infidelity formed a clear pattern that I couldn't and shouldn't try to reconcile with. Meanwhile, a different kind of revelation came from an unexpected source. One of our mutual friends, after seeing my wife's social media campaign against me, reached out with an interesting business proposition. He runs a medium-sized financial services company and had been impressed with what he'd heard about my new consulting business. He offered me a contract that would essentially triple my current client base and provide steady income for at least a year. After careful consideration and extensive discussions about expectations, I accepted his offer. This contract, combined with my existing clients, means I can now officially resign from my corporate position and focus entirely on my own business, something I hadn't expected to be able to do for at least another year. The timing is fortuitous in another way too. My friend whose spare room I've been occupying just learned that his company is transferring him to their Chicago office in 2 months. He offered to let me take over his apartment lease if I wanted, as he'd rather not break it and pay the penalty. The rent is reasonable, the location is convenient for my business needs, and it would give me a fresh start away from the home I shared with my wife. So in the span of just a few days, I've gone from feeling like my life was spiraling out of control to having a clear path forward, an uncontested divorce that should be finalized soon, a thriving business that can support me independently, and a new place to live that's not tied to painful memories. There's still the emotional fallout to deal with, of course. My therapist says it's normal to feel a mix of grief, relief, anger, and even guilt as a marriage ends, regardless of the circumstances. I'm continuing with weekly sessions and finding them increasingly helpful. I've also started reconnecting with friends I had somewhat neglected during my marriage, particularly those my wife hadn't been fond of. The support system that's emerging is stronger than I expected, and it's helping me envision a future that looks quite different from what I had planned with my wife, but potentially just as fulfilling in different ways. The divorce hearing is scheduled for next week. Assuming everything proceeds as expected, I'll be legally single again 7 days from now. My attorney doesn't anticipate any last-minute complications given my wife's clear motivation to finalize things quickly, but we're prepared just in case. As I reflect on this whole experience, I'm struck by how quickly life can change, both for worse and for better. A year ago, I thought I had a loving marriage, a stable career path, and 6 months ago, I was struggling financially and watching my marriage deteriorate. 3 months ago, I was starting a small side business out of desperation, and now I'm about to be divorced, running my own successful business and starting fresh in a new home. I don't know what the future holds, but for the first time in a long time, I'm actually looking forward to finding out. Thank you all for your support through this difficult journey. Your advice and encouragement have meant more than you know. I probably won't update again unless something truly significant happens during or after the divorce hearing, but I wanted to share this unexpected turn of events and express my gratitude to this community. Thank you and goodbye. Stay tuned for more stories from Argo Relationships.